Professor Hargopal, Professor Nandita Narayan, Srimati Vasanta, Manjeera, and dear friends. I consider it an honor to be asked to deliver the first Professor Sai Baba Memorial Committee. Just a few days before he passed away, we had a telephonic conversation discussing what our strategy should be in the appeal that had been filed by the state in the Supreme Court. And it took me by great surprise to learn after a few days that he was not around. I have at a distance admired the courage of Professor Sai Baba and the positivity that he emanated. From what I heard the previous speakers say, here is a person who was never cynical, never defeatist, and always lived with hope, not for just himself, but for several others awaiting justice. I want to begin today's lecture by talking about three scenarios which I think will describe the status of academic freedom in India today. The first scenario goes like this, and these are real stories, not fiction. In December 2022, the Madhya Pradesh police booked Professor Inamul Rahman, principal of the government New Law College in Indore, for allegedly keeping a Hindu-phobic and anti-national book in the college library. This book was titled Collective Violence and Criminal Justice System, co-authored by Dr. Sheetal Kanwal and Dr. Farhad Khan. This book was in the GNLC library since 2014. Dr. Rahman joined the GNLC 5 years later in 2019. The book, according to the Akhil Bharatiya Vidyarthi Parishad, the ABVP, which is the student wing of the Rashtriya Swayam Sevak Sangh, the RSS, this book talked about the emergence of Hindu communalism as a destructive ideology. It is also supposed to have said that the Vishwa Hindu Parishad and other Hindutva outfits seek to establish a Hindu majority state and want to enslave other communities. The book had been already revised in 2021 to remove the so-called offending portions. The Madhya Pradesh Higher Education Minister, Mohan Yadav, who now happens to be its Chief Minister, instituted an inquiry into how the book was being allowed to be used for reference in the college. Acting on a complaint by a second-year LLM student, Lucky Aidwal, who was a member of the ABVP, the Home Minister Narottam Mishra ordered the registration of an FIR under several provisions of the IPC. Section 153A, promoting enmity on grounds of religion, race, place of birth, residence. Section 295A, malicious acts intended to outrage feelings, religious feelings of any class. Section 500, criminal defamation. Section 504, intentional insult with an intent to provoke and breach peace. Section 505, statements conducting to public mischief. The FIR also named, apart from Professor Rahman, Dr. Farhad Khan, the co-author of the book's publisher, Amar Law Publication, and Professor Mirza Mojiz Beg. The Supreme Court stayed the arrest of Rahman and Beg. Rahman resigned as principal. The other two never returned to Indore. In May 2024, about 18 months after this happened, the Supreme Court of India quashed the FIR, terming it to be absurd. But the damage was done. None of the three could teach at the government New Law College again. The second scenario goes like this. A shocking video emerged in the social media in the last week of August 2023. In it, Tripti Tyagi, a teacher at the Neha Public School in Muzaffarnagar district in northern Uttar Pradesh, could be seen asking each of the students in her class to slap their 7-year-old classmate, who was a Muslim. As the boy stands fearfully wailing with each slap, the teacher is heard asking the other students to do it properly. The superintendent of police of the district later told reporters that the teacher told the students to hit the boy for not remembering his timetables. The SP further disclosed that the teacher's justification was, when mothers of Mohammedan students don't pay attention to their children's studies, their performance is ruined. The third scenario. On 9th August 2023, a 17-year-old Dalit male student in a partly aided school in Nanganeri, which is a town in Tirunelveli district in Tamil Nadu, was brutally attacked by sickles by his 3 classmates who were Maravars, an intermediate dominant caste forming part of the Mukkulathors. When his younger sister tried to save him, she too was attacked. What had provoked the brutal assault? Irked by the Dalit boy doing well in his class, far better than them, the dominant caste boys would constantly harass, humiliate, and taunt him with caste slurs and ask him to perform menial tasks for them. To avoid this, he stopped going to school. When the principal inquired, the Dalit boy confided the real reason. This then led to the incident I just spoke about. Both the boy and his younger sister were hospitalized with serious injuries for which they underwent surgeries. They were relocated to a different school. Within 3 days of this incident that sent shockwaves throughout Tamil Nadu, the government, after making all the right noises, appointed Justice K. Chandru, a former judge of the Madras High Court, as a one-man committee to suggest measures to be taken to create an atmosphere free of caste creed differences in schools and colleges in Tamil Nadu. Why was this necessary? As the New Indian Express reported in November 2015, school children in parts of Tirunelveli were wearing wristbands in different colors, each indicating the particular caste to which they belonged. It is red and yellow for the Tevars, blue and yellow for the Nadars, saffron for the Yadavs, all socially and politically powerful Hindu communities that come under the most backward classes category, while students of the Dalit community of Pallars wear wristbands in green and red, and the Arundhatiyars, also Dalits, wear green, black, and white. 4 years earlier, in August 2019, the Tamil Nadu State Education Department had issued a circular discouraging the practice in schools. The most vehement opposition to this move came from the BJP National Secretary, H. Raja, who tweeted that tying threads on wrists and wearing tilaks on foreheads are related to Hinduism. Banning these in schools, he said, was a blatant anti-Hindu action. He also asked, does the school education director have the courage to ban symbols of other religions? The above instances, the 3 instances I spoke of, give us a fair idea on where we stand on academic freedom in our country. The expression academic freedom has been deliberated and debated upon sufficiently the world over, mainly because it faces threats universally, even more than ever before. An updated version of the Academic Freedom Index, prepared by the FAU Institute of Political Sciences and the VDEM Institute, was brought out in 2025. It gives an overview of the state of academic freedom across 179 countries. Its analysis showed that countries with anti-pluralist parties in government have lower levels of academic freedom than those where anti-pluralist parties have little to no political influence. It notes how anti-pluralist parties lack commitment to the democratic process as the legal means of gaining and losing power. Once installed in power, anti-plural parties tend to deepen differences between political camps, reduce the space for public contestation, and undermine mutual forbearance. In the Academic Freedom Index of 2025, India features at the bottom 10 to 20% of countries where academic freedom is completely restricted. This is a huge dive from 2013, when it was within the category of fully free, and 2022, when it had fallen to mostly restricted. India features in the index just above Syria, Iran, Laos, and Palestine. India performs worse than even Hungary, Hong Kong, Sudan, Yemen, Bangladesh, and Russia. The AFI reveals that more than half of the world's population currently lives in completely restricted or severely restricted levels of academic freedom. Whereas in 2006, approximately 4 billion people lived in places with robust environments for academic freedom. Today, that number has declined by more than a quarter to 2.8 billion. A report titled Free to Think is brought out periodically by an international coalition of academics and experts named Scholars at Risk, SAR. In the latest version, SAR has assessed data collected from 1st July 2023 to 30 June 2024 of 391 attacks arising from 313 incidents in 51 countries and territories. The SAR report talks of the concerning trends in 18 countries, which includes India, over the past decade. India is among the countries where universities have cancelled lectures, poetry readings, and film screenings related to violence in the Middle East. Often, university leaders have justified the cancellations by expressing unspecified security concerns. India also figures amongst those countries where state and higher education officials call in the police or security forces to break up protests. The academic freedom that these empirical studies speak of can be best understood by referring to the report released on 31st May 2024 by the Working Group on Academic Freedom, comprising international experts constituted under the aegis of the United Nations. They have prepared a set of 9 principles for implementing the right to academic freedom. The foremost of these identifies academic freedom as a human right to acquire, develop, transmit, apply, and engage with a diversity of knowledge and ideas through research, teaching, learning, and discourse. Such engagement could take place inside the academic community, which is called as intramural expression, or outside the academic community, including with the public, called extramural expression. Another principle recognized is the right of the student to academic freedom at all levels, beginning with childhood schooling. The UN Special Rapporteur on the Right to Education, Farida Shahid, submitted her report on academic freedom at the 56th session of the UN Human Rights Council, held between 18th June and 12th July 2024. In it, she noted importantly that students should have the right to express themselves on specific subjects without fear of reprisal. Also, the respect due to cultural diversity and the need to ensure a multi-perspective approach, including in subjects such as history, should be accounted for. She urged that while educators should be encouraged to foster critical thinking and to provide diverse perspectives, they should do so in a manner that upholds the principle of pluralism, respect for others, and the pursuit of knowledge, including a supportive environment where students are encouraged to think critically, engage with varying viewpoints, and develop informed perspectives. Most significant is the Special Rapporteur's proposal that academic freedom should be considered to be an autonomous human right grounded in several provisions of international law. I now move on to something that is very close to what I do, that is the legal regime and the courts. Let us briefly examine what the legal regime in our country is concerning education and academic freedom. Article 39F of our Constitution talks of the unenforceable right of a child to be provided by the state opportunities and facilities to develop in a healthy manner and in conditions of freedom and dignity. Another directive principle is in Article 45, which originally provided that within a period of 10 years, the state shall endeavor to provide free and compulsory education to all children up to the age of 14 years. In 1993, the Supreme Court of India, in the landmark decision titled J.P. Unnikrishnan versus State of Andhra Pradesh, declared that the right to education is a fundamental right of every citizen up to the age of 14. It took another 10 years for the Parliament in 2002 to insert Article 21 capital A in Part 3 of the Constitution to recognize as a fundamental right the right of every child between the ages of 6 and 14 to free and compulsory education. That, however, was made dependent for its enforcement on a law made by Parliament. Incidentally, this amendment was notified only 8 years later, with effect from 1st April 2010. the same date on which the Right to Free and Compulsory Education Act, the RTE Act, became operational. Correspondingly, Article 45 was amended to the effect that the state shall endeavour to provide early childhood care and education to all children till they complete the age of 6. However, by restricting the fundamental right to education under Article 21A to children between the ages of 6 and 14, the constitutional promise remains incomplete. The judgment in J.P. Unnikrishnan was in a case concerning the malaise of capitation fees being collected for engineering and medical seats in private educational institutions. That problem, however, continues. Two other constitutional provisions that require to be noticed are Article 51, capital A, Clause H, which states that it shall be the duty of every citizen to develop the scientific temper, humanism, and the spirit of inquiry and reform. Another provision is Clause K of the same Article 51, capital A, which states that every citizen who is a parent or guardian shall provide opportunities for education to his child, or as the case may be, ward, between the ages of 6 and 14 years. Article 25 guarantees to all persons the freedom of conscience, the right to freely profess, practice, and propagate religion. Article 30 recognizes the fundamental right of both religious and linguistic minorities to establish and administer educational institutions of their choice. The High Courts and the Supreme Court engage on a regular basis with numerous issues concerning the right to education, including the admission of students to professional courses, reservation of seats, appointment of teachers and principals in schools, vice chancellors in universities, anti-ragging measures, recognition and affiliation of educational institutions, and so on. As regards minority institutions, two important decisions in the recent past deserve mention. In November 2024, the Supreme Court recognized the right of the madrasas in UP to run schools providing for religious instruction and imparting education in other subjects up to Standard 12. It did not, however, permit them to award degrees or diplomas. In the second decision, by a narrow majority of 4-3, the Supreme Court held that the Aligarh Muslim University would not lose its minority character only because it stood converted into a university by way of a pre-independence statute. Yeah, thank you. However, these instances do not quite test the court's responses to curbs on academic freedom. Where they do, the result can be disappointing. One such instance has been the judiciary's handling of the cases of students and teachers jailed for protesting against the Citizenship Amendment Act of 2019 and its aftermath. It will be recalled that spontaneous protests erupted not just in Delhi, but throughout the country and even among the Indian diaspora world over. Several hundreds of the protesting students and academics were arrested by the police. Some of them were booked under the repressive Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, the UAPA, for alleged anti-national activity, only to ensure that coming out on bail is next to impossible. 5 years have passed, and with no prospect of the trial in these cases commencing anytime soon, there appears to be no real justification for denying them bail. And now I come to the case of Professor Sai Baba. The manner in which the Supreme Court of India dealt with the case involving Professor G. N. Sai Baba, who taught English at the Delhi University, has had many a legal scholar express surprise and disapproval. A detailed discussion of the case at this stage may not be warranted, as it is still pending in the Supreme Court. Yet, what we need to know is this. The entire case of the prosecution in support of its invocation of the provisions of the UAPA was that Professor Sai Baba was part of a banned terrorist organization, had planned to commit terrorist acts. The case rested entirely on the electronic evidence in the form of CDs, pen drives, and a laptop seized from his residence on 12 September 2013. He was arrested on 9th May 2014. Having been afflicted with polio since his childhood, Professor Sai Baba was permanently on a wheelchair. Despite this, bail was refused. It took him 10 years to finally emerge a free person. As was mentioned earlier, on 7th March 2017, the trial court found Professor Sai Baba and the other co-accused guilty, but this judgment was overturned by the Nagpur bench of the Bombay High Court on 14th October 2022, more than 5 years thereafter. The High Court held that the proceedings in criminal cases were null and void for want of valid sanction in terms of Section 45, subsection 1 of the UAPA. Literally overnight, and this too was adverted to, literally overnight an appeal was filed by the state of Maharashtra, which was taken up by a special bench of the Supreme Court on the very next morning, which was a Saturday, that is 15th October 2022, in the residence of one of the judges. The acquittal was stayed, perhaps a rare occurrence in the history of the Supreme Court. Professor Sai Baba continued, therefore, in the Anda cell in the Nagpur Central Jail, with the Supreme Court being unmoved by his deteriorating medical condition. It took another 6 months for the Supreme Court, by an order dated 19th April 2023, to remand the appeals to the High Court for a fresh hearing. For the second time, by judgment dated 5th March 2024, another bench of the Bombay High Court at Nagpur acquitted all the accused by holding that not only was there no valid sanction to prosecute any of the accused, but that the evidence gathered did not prove the case of the prosecution. Fortunately, in the further appeals by the state against this judgment, no stay was granted by the Supreme Court. As a result, Professor Sai Baba could ultimately come out of jail a free man, with his head held high, but his body badly wrecked by the callous treatment he received at the hands of the state during the 10+ years of incarceration. The process was the punishment. Unfortunately, he did not live long thereafter and succumbed to a post-operative complication after undergoing surgery for gallbladder stones. He was just 57. He was an intellectual whose PhD was on Indian writing in English and nation making. 2 volumes of his writings and poems, while in prison, have been published. The question that troubles one's conscience the most is this: who will be held accountable and when for what the system did to a man of learning and forbearance? Justice appears to have eluded academics and students in the above instances, where they've been accused of being anti-nationals and charged with offenses under draconian criminal laws. But then it also appears to elude them when they are the victims at the hands of the non-state actors like vigilante groups and dominant castes. I will make good this comment by referring to the aftermath of the 3 scenarios I referred to at the beginning of my talk. In the first scenario, in the Indore Government New Law College case, it was only in May 2024 that the Supreme Court quashed the FIR against Professor Rahman and his 3 accused, after terming the criminal case as absurd. However, Professor Rahman, who was forced to resign, remains uncompensated for the agony and humiliation he has undergone. The others too have not been able to return to the GNLC. This is not an isolated instance. There have been persistent attacks by Hindu right-wing groups on educational institutions across the countries run by Christian missionaries. The priests and nuns are harassed, congregational prayers are disrupted, the land is encroached upon or buildings bulldozed, and some of them falsely accused of indulging in forcible conversions. These cases too are engaging the attention of courts. In the second scenario, the case of the young Muslim boy slapped repeatedly by his classmates at the instigation and instruction of his teacher, that case was taken to the Supreme Court by Tushar Gandhi. The court found egregious violations of Section 17 of the RTE Act, which prohibits any child being subject to physical punishment or mental harassment. The state has been asked to bear the entire costs of the education of the child till he completes his schooling. The case remains in the Supreme Court for monitoring. The dismal prospect for secular education could well characterize what is happening in government-run schools across the country, including the Kendriya Vidyalayas. There is a renewed stridency to these schools hosting events that further the Hindu right-wing agenda. Professor Krishna Kumar laments the disillusionment of teachers in government schools being reduced to event managers or uploaders of incomplete data with little or no time for their primary task, which is imparting education. All this on top of the fact that there are several documented studies to show that the state of infrastructure in the public schools across the country is pathetic, to say the least. A woeful shortage of everything essential: teachers, classrooms, chairs and tables, blackboards, clean drinking water, clean toilets. Naturally, therefore, the private tuition industry is flourishing. The hope of academic freedom to pursue education is but a distant dream for those who cannot afford the costs. In the third scenario, the attack on the Dalit boy by the dominant caste Hindu boys, the Tamil Nadu state government stepped in to provide relief for both the medical treatment of the young boy and his sister, but also ensured his admission to another school where he continues to do well in his studies. When Justice Chandru met him, he wished even his attackers that they would do well in their studies. And Justice Chandru was astonished that such a young boy could display so much maturity. He was again recently attacked physically, but it is possible, according to media reports, that this did not have a caste angle. Reporter Sania Dhingra talks about the recent phenomenon of dozens of RSS Swayam Sevak triumphantly marching across the JNU campus with drums, trumpets, and clashing cymbals. Many wielded the customary shakha lathis, unimaginable 12 years ago. One of the professors who spoke to her commented, and I quote, "Earlier, admittedly, the teachers had a bias against students who subscribed to the BJP RSS ideology, but there was never a full-blown attack on academics itself." And he added, and I quote, "The problem is that as a result of the former left's volubility all these years, JNU came to represent the deep feelings of victimhood and otherization harbored by the right. That is why winning JNU has been almost more important for them than winning some state elections. It is like finally conquering the institution that has represented their intellectual marginalization and humiliation for decades." This is the same ABVP which has facilitated the rise of many a present-day leader. The Prime Minister, the Home Minister, the Raksha Mantri, several ministers of the Union Cabinet, many of the chief ministers of the BJP-ruled states like Uttar Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, and Rajasthan, former ministers like the late Arun Jaitley, Prakash Javadekar, Ravi Shankar Prasad, and even the former Vice President Venkaiah Naidu. They were all student leaders once who cut their teeth with the ABVP and were focused on challenging the ruling establishment of their times. They did undergo persecution and even imprisonment during the infamous emergency unleashed by Mrs. Gandhi and her cronies. However, one doesn't recall their being called Tukde Tukde or anti-national. Professor Gyan Prakash disagrees with the widely shared prognosis that what we are undergoing as a country today is another undeclared emergency. According to him, what we have today is a more virulent form of totalitarianism where dissent is simply eradicated from public spaces, aided by the complete control of the mainstream media, both electronic and social. Also, the heavy hammer of a bouquet of repressive criminal laws brought against the present-day academics and students appears unrelenting. The instances that have been much discussed in the media reveal a pattern to the ABVP's methods. They can vandalize departments if they feel that a teacher has said something in class that they think is insulting to Hinduism or hurts religious sentiments. Protests against appointment to academic positions of whom they perceive to be left liberal, secular, or urban Naxal. In November 2018, historian Ramchandra Guha withdrew from a teaching position he was offered at the Ahmedabad University. Dr. Firoz Khan, who was offered his first job to teach Sanskrit literature at the Banaras Hindu University, could not conduct a single class. Some 30 students of the ABVP staged a sit-in outside the Vice Chancellor's office in protest, saying that it wasn't right for a Muslim professor to be teaching them Sanskrit. They obviously disagree with the recent Supreme Court judgment that reminded us that Urdu is an Indian language and that language is not tied to religion and that multilingualism is a reflection of India's reality. Women teachers in Maharashtra have had their classes disrupted by angry mobs of ABVP cadres demanding apology for what they perceived to be an insult to Chhatrapati Shivaji. Instead of proceeding against them, the Satara police booked the teacher for causing disturbance of peace. And this had to be undone by the Bombay High Court subsequently. Even private universities are succumbing to pressures of not only the ruling establishment but vigilante mobs furthering the right-wing agenda. By not supporting their own faculty who have asserted the right of academic freedom, these institutions have forced their resignation. The resignation of Professor Sabyasachi Das of Ashoka University is one such instance. This vindicates the observation of the special rapporteur, and I quote her, "Academic freedom is curtailed when universities seeking state resources and or patronage enter into compromising relationships with people in power." We are seeing this play out in the US now, resulting in a curious situation whereby academic freedom is suppressed with the apparent support of the academic establishment. The net result is a system operating mostly through hidden self-censorship. More recently, Professor Mahmoodabad was booked for a social media comment made by him following the press briefing held by the armed forces on Operation Sindoor. The Supreme Court protected him from arrest, but astonishingly directed that the SIT constituted by it will analyze the hidden meaning of the words used by him. Even private think tanks have not been spared, and the Center for Policy Research has been raided with the IT and the ED issuing show cause notices to it. There are then other challenges to academic freedom. Among the serious challenges to both institutional autonomy and academic freedom is the corporatization of education. Major business enterprises are in the field of education and have been successful in commoditizing, branding, and marketing education as a product, affordable to a few and out of reach for the many. Teachers are reduced to service providers and students to being consumers. Commentators on this worrying trend tell us that the focus now is less on research and more on performance and outcomes. The high costs of pursuing professional courses, including law, in private elite universities compels many a student to borrow heavily to complete the basic level of education and then succumb to the temptation of opting for the highest paying job. A direct impact on academic freedom to choose one's career path. The use of digital technology has not made it any easier for academic freedom. On the contrary, the challenge today is sifting the fake news from the real, spotting the manufactured AI-generated work from the genuinely researched ones, and shutting out the garbage that the net is host to. How does one protect impressionable minds from the onslaught of WhatsApp forwards, where half-baked opinions based on misinformation passes off for expert opinion? In this scenario, the internet has the potential of posing yet another threat to academic freedom. Add to this the fact that most campuses today are fortresses, where CCTV cameras facilitate constant surveillance and biometric attendance is the norm. Campus violence is on the rise, as is drug abuse. Police everywhere are infiltrating student WhatsApp groups. The faculty too is under their radar. Signing of letter petitions protesting arbitrary actions of the government or even of right-wing groups and their role models invites show cause notice to the faculty for crossing the line. Loss of institutional autonomy is felt most when the control is sought to be exercised over what can constitute the syllabus and the reading material that can be referred to. This concerns both schools and colleges. The RSS has an educational wing called Vidya Bharati. As of today, if you go on the website, it tells you that the Vidya Bharati runs as many as 12,754 formal schools, hosting 3.2 million students, and 12,654 informal schools, hosting 2.45 million students. And it also employs 1.5 lakh teachers. Most of these schools are affiliated to the CBSE, various state boards, and the National Institute of Open Schooling. Vidya Bharati's books are published in Hindi and 12 other regional languages, including Bengali, Tamil, and Odia. And they are taught in addition to the government-approved curriculum. A question and answer on page 5 of Bodhmala 4, a textbook on cultural knowledge intended for class 4 students, reads like this. Question: which are the countries along our present-day border that were once part of a country? Answer: Brahmadesh, brackets Myanmar, Bangladesh to the east, Pakistan and Afghanistan to the west, Tibet, Nepal and Bhutan to the north, and Sri Lanka to the south. A teacher's guidebook, part of the same series, makes this amazing claim. Earlier, Hindu culture prevailed all over Jambudweep. What we call Asia today was the ancient Jambudweep. The whole of Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Iran, Kazakhstan, Israel, Russia, Mongolia, China, Myanmar, Indonesia, Malaysia, Java, Sumatra, India, Bangladesh, Nepal, Bhutan, Pakistan, and Afghanistan were part of it. So a teacher is supposed to teach this. to class 4 students. A teacher's guidebook. All this may not be cause for worry if it weren't part of the general push for revival of what is now termed as Indian knowledge systems. These ideas appear to have percolated into the curriculum of formal institutions like the National Institute of Open Schooling, which has already included in its curriculum the claims of Kannada's atomic theory, Sushruta's plastic surgery, and Vedic mathematics. The book Vaimanika Shastra is cited in NCERT's new module on the Chandrayaan mission for seemingly revealing that our civilization had the knowledge of flying vehicles. This could also explain ISRO chief Somnath claiming in 2023 that major scientific developments in branches like metallurgy, astrology, astronomy, aeronautical sciences, and physics took place in ancient India and were later taken to Europe by the Arabs. Textbooks on history across grades and political science for classes 11 and 12 have been particular targets for retelling and rewriting. Last month, the press reported the students in government schools in Delhi will soon study about the RSS alongside freedom fighters under a new educational initiative called Rashtriya Niti. Another news item disclosed that RSS will be opening Sainik schools to train students for the armed forces. A long-time watcher of the Hindu right-wing groups, Nilanjan Mukhopadhyaya, said that the idea behind the RSS operating such a large network of schools across the country is to catch the Hindu minds young and instill the idea of ancient Hindu invincibility, a past when Hindu India was the dominant race all over the world, and that the golden bird of Indian civilization was destroyed by 1,000 years of slavery, first in the hands of Muslims and then the Christian colonial powers. Then there are a slew of directives to universities and institutes of higher learning from the UGC. This extends from organizing meditation sessions developed by Sri Ravi Shankar's agency, the Art of Living Foundation, to celebrating events and festivals within campuses. There are revisions to syllabuses and reading lists that do not pass the muster of right-wing groups. The forcible removal of the essay titled 300 Ramayanas, 5 Examples and 3 Thoughts on Translation by noted literature A.K. Ramanujan has been removed from the list of reading materials for the BA Honours course in the Delhi University. Then you have the complete takeover of the Indian Council for Historical Research, the Archaeological Survey of India, the Indian Science Congress, the appointments as directors of the various IITs and the IIMs, the vice chancellors of various universities, including the Nalanda University and even Vishwabharati, and even recently the Film and Television Institute of India. When one steps back to view the changes in the past decade in the field of education, it is striking how persistent, deep, and pervasive has been the effort to capture the popular imagination of not just the public, but of young, impressionable minds. There is a concerted attempt to purge it of anything that can be seen as questioning the policies and actions of the ruling establishment. There is a smugness to debunking science and glorifying past learnings. When you prefix liberal with left and misspell secular as secular, deriding intellectual discourse is relatively simple. What can be taught? How can it be taught? Who can teach? Who can be taught? What can be written about or commented on are all no longer to be decided by educational institutions. They are to be pre-cleared, vetted by extra-legal mechanisms and bodies. You can dream, you can imagine, but to act on them, you need permission. Dissent is not to be encouraged, much less tolerated. In the India of 2025, Faiz poem Bol can be recited, but terms and conditions apply. बोल की लब आज़ाद है तेरे, बोल ज़बा अब तक तेरी है, तेरी सुतवा जिस्म है तेरा, बोल की जान अब तक तेरी. Reciting हम देखेंगे or shouting Azadi in the campus of an educational institution might invite being labeled urban Naxal, Tukre gang, Khan Market type, or even JNU type. I come to the last portions of this talk. Academic freedom in India throws up challenges of accommodating several competing interests And on top of it, social inequalities exacerbated by caste, class, and communal prejudices. The Supreme Court has, in the context of accepting a limited quota in Delhi's St. Stephen College for those following this Christian faith, reminded all of us that, and I quote, every educational institution, irrespective of the community to which it belongs, is a melting pot in our national life. The students and teachers are the critical ingredients. It is there they develop respect for and tolerance of the cultures and beliefs of others. It is essential, therefore, that there should be a proper mix of students of different communities in all educational institutions. Is there then hope? This is what most of us here would want to know. History tells us that even these times pass. Many a teacher and student is in some or other corner of the country resisting being taken over by or surrendering to the pressures and pulls of a repressive regime. They signify the resilience of the human spirit to stand out firm against the odds. Ours is a plural society with lived histories of inclusivity, sharing, and compassion. If we don't let that yearning within each of us to get snuffed out, there will be hope. Most importantly, it is essential for us to nurture that spirit and the constitutional values that we wish to live by, so that future generations will learn from our experience and know what to value and what to preserve. The changes that we have witnessed in the past decade may be of a more enduring nature than we can imagine. It renders the task of restitution of our belief in constitutional values of inclusivity and pluralism even more challenging. How do we reclaim secular spaces for academic freedom within public universities and institutions of higher learning? How should private universities be facilitated to regain institutional autonomy? How can we cultivate and nurture scientific temper and a spirit of inquiry in young minds? How can we improve the conditions of our public and government schooling to provide a hope for academic freedom from childhood to adulthood? How do we build on the space that we have on the internet and spread the good work of through influencers? How do we restore dignity of the individual in the closed learning space without distinction on the basis of caste, gender, and general stereotyping? We have in our midst different models of education that appear to provide that alternate space, at least in the recent past. The Shantiniketan model or the Krishnamurti Foundation of India model, for instance. Can we replicate these or adapt them for today's needs? Our answers to these questions will determine the course of academic freedom for those that follow. In signing off today's talk, I wish to recall a marvelous judgment delivered on 11th August 1986 by the Supreme Court in Bijoy Emmanuel versus State of Kerala. The three appellants before the Supreme Court were Bijoy, Bino Mol, and Bindu Emmanuel. They belong to the Jehovah's Witnesses, a Christian denomination. Daily, during the morning assembly, when the national anthem was sung, the three children stood respectfully but did not sing because, according to them, it was against the tenets of their religious faith. Not the words or the thoughts of the anthem, but the singing of it. This led them to being expelled from the school, which action they unsuccessfully challenged in the Kerala High Court. The Supreme Court on 11th August 1986 reversed the High Court decision and held that the expulsion of the three children from the school was a violation of their fundamental right to freedom of conscience and freely to profess, practice, and propagate religion under Article 25, Clause 1 of the Constitution. The court ended the judgment with a flourish, reminding us that our tradition teaches tolerance, our philosophy preaches tolerance, our constitution practices tolerance. It exhorts us not to dilute it. The children were asked to be readmitted to the school. Thank you very much. Thank you.